don't know what I'm
Oh,
doing.
jeez. Messed that up.
One.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the Story Darlings podcast. I'm Sandra.
And I'm Tara.
Tara, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about a book that we got, an advanced reader copy. Something like that. It's called A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. And I did not know very much about this author, but Sandra just filled me in that she has previously written a whole bunch of books in the romance genre as well as YA fantasy, but this will be her first foray into the adult romantasy.
And this one is so fun. We will do a better job of starting off with no spoilers because when this episode is released, it'll be release day. I mean, you got to give people time to read the book, right? So
Yeah.
we'll talk about, the first few minutes and give a clear spoiler warning before we get into that stuff. But I thought it would be a good idea to have like the synopsis of this and then kind of the trope map because I mean,
There's
we
a
love
few.
tropes, right? Yeah, there are a lot. So we have arranged marriage, enemies to lovers, a kinda love triangle, which we'll get into, multi POV, orphaned main characters, and then there's just dragons and witches and magic and creatures and that kind of thing. So that was kind of fun.
You also have found family in there.
That's true. We do have found family. That's a
Or at
trope
least
I
the
love.
start of a found family.
Yeah. The synopsis: dragons are extinct, witches are outcast, magic is dying, but human lust for power is immortal. Dragonfire no longer blisters the skies over Pantera, but inside the lavish palace, life is still perilous, especially for Tamsin. Raised in the glittering court alongside the princesses, it's her duty to be punished for their misdeeds. Treated as part of the royal family, but also as the lowliest servant, Tamsin fits nowhere. Her only friend is Stig, captain of the guard, though sometimes she thinks he wants more than friendship. When Fel, the beast of the borderlands, descends on her home, Tamsin's world becomes even more dangerous. To save the pampered princesses from a fate worse than death, she is commanded to don a veil and marry the brutal warrior. She agrees to the deception even though it means leaving Stig and the only life she's ever known behind. That's all I'm going to read because I feel like these are plot points that we'll get into, but yeah. What did you think of the book?
I liked the book. And this may just be where my brain was this whole week as I was reading this book, but I had a hard time staying awake during the book. But as Sandra knows, I did just get 4 new little puppies, so my brain was very much on mommy mode, needing to sleep when the puppies were sleeping. And so there were points that I was like, this could go faster. I need more happening in here to keep me awake. But then there were points that I really enjoyed it, especially towards the end.
Yeah, it went much faster at the end.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this to you too, but the chapters felt longer as well. I'm just used to like the quick, snappy Everking kind of chapters, and these were like 15 plus pages long. And it's not a long book. It's only, 300 something pages, but those long chapters.
Well, and this felt to me like the first book in what's going to be a series of books. And so you have a lot of that world building right at the beginning. And if you've ever listened to this podcast, I am not down for the world building. Like
From Blood and Ash.
I think that is part of what was getting me with this book too, because there was a lot of world building, a lot of lead up to things that happened later on in the book. Like I said, I feel very much like this is the first book in a series. And so there's a lot of lead up to future books as well.
This one, so I read the synopsis, like part of it anyways here, but I went to it completely blind because I don't like to know anything. And I think she does a really great job of sprinkling in those hints of like things to expect, especially from the prologue. We get a ton of information from the prologue. It's only a couple of pages long. You already find out that dragons went extinct because men declared a war on them and just pretty much annihilated all of them. They used wolves to hunt them down and kill the dragons, and this was, I think, 80 years earlier is when the last of the dragons was slain. And so that's the information that we're given. And then we come to present day and we meet Tamsin, who's the main character. I've heard this concept, or at least the phrase used, of whipping boy, not really whipping girl. I felt like that was pretty pretty new to me, like that concept here. I was like, is this really a thing? And so I'm like Googling it, trying to see if these were actually things, which it's still kind of gray whether they were or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if
Mm-mm.
this was an actual thing. And so that intrigued me. But I mean, is now a good time to give our spoiler warning
Yeah.
so we can just dive in? Okay.
Spoiler, because I don't know what else I can say without giving away things.
Yeah. Spoiler warning. We are jumping into it now. So if you are picking up this episode on the book's release day, just, listen to the first couple minutes and go pick up the book and then come back and give us a listen and we can talk about the rest. But yeah, so we fast forward to present day. We meet Tamsin and she is currently, I think she's like on her way to
21.
she's 21 years old. She's a
Yeah.
fiery redhead. She's tall, very strong. We learn that she can heal from injuries
Faster than
because
she should be able to.
yes, she's been accused of by members of the court of being a witch, and no one's like put substantiated that at all. But they accuse her of being a witch because she can heal.
And her red hair, because apparently it's well known that witches have red hair, or thought
Yeah,
that witches have red hair.
So when we meet her, the poor girl she's getting 5 lashes from the Lord Chamberlain. Doesn't it remind you of kind of from Blood and Ash as well when you meet Poppy and there's like that weird
Mm-hmm.
duke that she's living under and being punished?
Okay, so for me, I went to a Frozen, the Weasel dude, the Duke of Wesselton.
What?
Okay, the dude who danced with Anna in
Well,
Frozen. In Frozen, the movie.
you guys, I've seen this like once, maybe a long time
Okay.
ago. I
Well,
don't remember.
he's this very obnoxious bald guy who just doesn't understand that he's obnoxious, right? And so that is who I pictured. And you will have to look it up and watch at least like a little snippet because that is what was going on in my head every time they mentioned this guy.
I couldn't tell if he was basically assaulting her as well because
Hmm.
so many times he was like leaning in and like breathing into her ear and just being really rapey and
Yes.
gross. But we learned that she's getting 5 lashings because her sisters, quote unquote, were fighting over like a hair accessory or something
Hmm.
stupid like that. And she gets along really well with the youngest.
I think
He's
she gets
always
along with all of them. It's
Mhm.
just the older two don't show the same empathy that the youngest one does. The youngest one doesn't want her to get whippings, doesn't think that that's right. And so she does her best to never get whippings for her. Whereas the older two are like, that's her job. And they don't have the same sort of empathy. But she loves them. You see that later on, that they're just as important to her in the like scheme of things. But I guess she does like the younger one better because the younger one shows her love for her a little bit better.
Also showing their love for her is the young captain of the guard, Stig, and we learn he is captain of the guard because his father is the Lord Regent, and so his kind of hooked him up with that job. And as soon as we were introduced to this character, I was like, "Oh, Tara's gonna have words about this guy."
I am.
Go right into it.
While I'm like, he seems like a decent guy, right? Especially in the flashbacks of him as a child and like comforting her and everything, where he fell in love with her, I think. I also think that he is a source of most of her problems in the court right now because of jealousy and because his dad doesn't like the match, and his dad has caught on that his son has feelings for her, and so he is overly punishing her for his son having feelings for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do believe he is a source of harm for her, and he, for whatever reason, doesn't see that.
He is also someone who just doesn't question the rules and the ethics of things, right? Like
Yeah,
he's fine with the rules and it's just like, "Oh, just live your life and follow the rules and one day you'll be free," instead of doing anything about it now.
he's very much like Kale. There's a scene later in the book
Oh
that I
no.
was
I
like,
knew it.
are
I knew you
you
were going to bring up
flipping
Kale.
kidding me? Okay, so spoiler alert, heavy spoiler alert here. It is hinted that there may be dragons still, but they're in hiding because Fel, his father, had killed a dragon 25-ish years earlier, right? Because that is how he got Fel, is there was this little baby with this dragon and he killed it. I'm still iffy on whether or not he actually killed it. I think we see that dragon again. I don't think it actually died. But anyway, so there has been sightings of dragons after that 80-year mark, and it is hinted that there are still dragons. And we do find out that there are still dragons because Tamsin is a dragon, and she accidentally turns into her dragon and chaos ensues. But then she turns again in front of Stig. And Stig, much like KL, who reacted very horribly to Selena being an assassin, reacts very horribly to Tamsin, the woman he just professed love for, being a dragon. And he tries to kill her multiple times. Multiple.
You say Kale. I know you haven't watched the House of the Dragon yet, but
No.
there's a character named Kristen Cole who is one of the White Cloaks, right? And he's in love with the Princess Rhaenyra until he is spurned. And then he just becomes a petty, self righteous, quote unquote, honor, but he has no honor, like
Nice
asshole.
guy.
Nice guy, TM.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly
I'm
reminded me
such
of
a nice
him.
guy. Yeah. Until you don't get your way, you're a nice
Yeah,
guy.
until you reject me, and then my true colors come out.
Although she rejected him and he wasn't an asshole, right? She rejected him on the vow night and she told him, no, this is what I'm gonna do. And he was still a nice guy. The reason he was there when she turned into the dragon was he thought that Fail killed her. And so he was going to storm Fail's kingdom,
Borg.
lordship, whatever his place, and fight him because he thought he killed her. So he was still being a nice guy up until she was this dragon, which to his defense, everybody has said are such horrible things and the bane of all existence and the reason humans have any problems and like just horribleness. So I give him a benefit of the doubt, but still he knows Tamsin, so I feel like that should override any horrible things he's heard about dragons.
I mean, having that kind of history together since childhood, and then he just acts like that. It's like ready to stab her, is like holding a sword up to impale her.
Yeah.
It's like, you're a dick. Anyway, at the beginning, this dozen of northern soldiers, led by the beast of the borderlands, Fel Dryton, who was found by the Onyx dragon when he was a baby, he shows up because they've been protecting the borders of this kingdom of Pantera without really any reward. And Fel is pretty frustrated with this because his father, his adopted father who got him, Baylor, did nothing about it. And so he's decided he is going to demand something in return this time. And so this is when he demands the hand of one of the princesses of Pantera. And then, of course, Hamlin, the king, and his court try and pull a fast one on him. They do pull a fast one on him.
Oh, yeah.
But it's so interesting, everything that transpires.
Okay, so two things. What is your take on Hamlin?
Wet blanket. He's just ahead, really. I don't think he's really the one pulling the strings.
I think he is. We heard a little bit about his family history on being just dicks.
His grandfather.
Uh-huh. Who convinced a witch to put a spell on dragons, and then she was the first witch burned in their kind of Salem witch trials of witches.
Well, they had a kind of a fling going, right? He was using her.
He seduced her to then
Yes.
convince her to do this spell. I think he is just not a very good ruler. He's only in it for what comes to him. Like Henry VIII, right? He's king. He thinks he's the shit because he's king and he can do whatever he wants and it doesn't matter. And at the same time, his kingdom, his people are dying, not thriving at all because he is using everything for himself. And I think that had been the whole line of their kingdom, starting with his great grandfather or whatever. They just used the power for themselves and didn't care about the people at all.
I agree with that. And also, I'm curious to learn more, probably, hopefully, in the next book about why he seems to defer to the Lord Regent, Stig's father, quite a bit as well. Because there were a lot of moments at court where he would just like wait before saying anything and like look to check in with Stig's father first. So that's why I'm like, what is going on here?
He is technically his advisor, so you would expect him to be advising him in some ways.
But he's also like the fucking king. Like,
Yeah.
use your own brain
Judgment.
and Yeah. We also learn, though, that his wife, the queen, she's actually a pretty decent person, it
Mhm.
seems.
But she still allows things to happen that she
Yeah.
probably could have stopped.
Yes, and we learn that she was also kind of married off to Hamlin from a very far away kingdom kind of place as well. The only thing that really made me change my idea of her was the going away thing, what she whispered into Tamsin's ear that you're more powerful than you
Yeah, I think
know.
she knew something was
Hmm.
going on with Tamsin. I wonder, okay, because we see a flashback to when Tamsin was made, born, hatched, I don't know.
Spawned. Spawned.
So we see dragons and they're talking about how they have not been able to have hatchlings for a while, and we learn later that that is in fact the spell that was put on dragons, is that they would not be able to have hatchlings, which means when the current dragons age and die or die, that's the end of dragons, according to what the people think. But we also learn that magic has a way. And in this case, magic had its way with
Jurassic Park. Life finds a way.
yeah, basically, because we find out that the way that magic has decided that it's going to protect the dragon line is by when dragons hatch or have like their little hatchlings, they are now going to be human looking.
Shifters.
Yeah,
We're like in a shifter kind of
yeah.
book now.
But the dragons don't know this. So when the mommy dragon has this little baby that is a human, they make her kick it out or kill it, is what they wanted her to do. But she doesn't kill it. She takes it to the human world and drops it. And I'm wondering, that's long drawn out explanation of my question, is whether or not the queen actually saw the dragon drop off the baby. And that's how she knows that she has more power than she thinks she does. And she just kind of didn't tell anybody about the dragon being there.
Yeah, she did what she could
Hmm.
given her particular constraints, I guess.
Yeah.
We see Tamsin kind of spying on Beast of the Borderlands and his entourage, meeting with the Lord Regent and King Hamlin and stuff to discuss the terms that he's demanding for protecting their borders. So they're like, sure, we'll give you a princess, but you're going to have to marry her tomorrow. And to seal the deal, everyone has to bear witness to you betting her, like taking her V card. This is like the most awkward. This would be so weird.
But they actually did that for royal weddings, like throughout the Middle Ages. They even, up until recent history, had to check for virginity status before they could get married.
So gross. So Tamsin's to keep it a secret who she is. Stay under this veil until he's bedded her successfully. And
Successfully.
successfully. The whole scene, how it was described, and everyone's like, oh, yep, there's her maidenhead all over him when he jumps out of bed, pissed off. I was like, oh my.
That whole scene had a lot of secondhand embarrassment for me.
Yes, yes. I was mortified. And I don't think Stig could even stomach it, right? Like Stig
No, he
left.
wanted to leave. No, his dad wouldn't let him leave because
Oh
he said,
yeah.
"Your duty is here to protect the realm." And he's like, "I guess," but he was just sitting there thinking, "I'm gonna protect Tamsin if she cries out needing me."
I I feel
And I
like
mean, she cried out, but not needing him.
these were satisfied cry outs.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe Stig something broke in him having to be present for this. I don't know. He
I don't
was
know.
not good.
But the only bright spots for this for me in my secondhand embarrassment the whole time is Fell the entire time, because he was calling out the hypocrisy and the stupidness of these ceremonies in little jabs, and I loved it. There was a moment where he was just stripping because he's like, this fucker's stupid, and he just stripped in front of everybody, and they're like, but you don't have to take off all of your clothes for this. And he's like, no, you wanted a show. Let's give you a show. And all of the women are like, ooh, ooh. And all of the men are trying to cover their eyes.
It's funny because he's from the north and they're treated like the barbarians, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that are just a violent kind of society and all of this, when in all actuality it's them.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated how he kept like blocking out them being able to peek through the curtain with his big body, you know? I was like, "Oh, maybe this isn't so bad."
Well, and was it his big body, or I kept getting a sense of foreshadowing. I called it about 30% through what was gonna happen at the end, and I was right. I'd just like to point that out. Woohoo. But I don't think it was his body shadowing some of it out. I think it was the fire and ice, smog and fog coming together and blocking. I think this was our first foreshadowing that there was something different about him as well.
They had very animal kind of reactions to each other.
Even a scene before when she was spying, they had this draw to each other. They could sense where each other were, and it was very much like a mate bond to me.
Hmm.
So
Very primal.
I'm hoping that we will see that there was some sort of a mate bond because we do find out that there was something special about him, and I don't think that that dragon was going to eat him. I think that dragon was his mommy trying to take care of him. And that's also why I think we saw her later because there was a dragon, a black dragon that they meet in the crags, right?
There were.
And one of them had a mark that was clearly from a dragon bone, which is what his father said he used on the dragon to kill it when he took him. And this dragon kind of just stared at him. And I think that that was his mommy seeing him for the first time again because we do find out that he is in fact a black dragon.
Uh-huh.
He makes a change as well later on.
There were several black dragons
Mhm.
in that scene. I liked getting the perspective, especially the very first time Tanzin changed and just fried Arkin's ass, like turned him, like he deserved it so much. When she's flying around and freaking out and she's just like, what is going on? And she, kind of like a homing beacon, is drawn to the crags and wants to go there. But I mean, she runs into Thora first to help her.
Yeah,
But
little
yeah.
witch. Okay,
Mhm.
so when we had this flashback to Tamsin's birth, we found out that her real dad is royalty of the dragons. So she is in fact a princess that he
Mhm.
was given. So technically the king didn't lie. Fel did marry a princess. It just was a princess
Yes.
of dragons. And we hear that much like Fourth Wing, the dragons each have their kind of place in the world, and a lot of it is based off of their colors and what those
Mhm.
colors mean in their temperaments and their abilities. And the black dragons are the kind of foot soldiers. They're big, brawny, strong, which does suit Fel because that is what he is. He's a black dragon. And then the royalty is that orange color, red color,
Mhm.
whatever.
The fire-breathing
Hmm.
dragons, they're rare. So our girl is top of the top dragons. Wait, are we sure that Fel is a black dragon or was he frost? Because I thought there was like a
Oh yeah, no, he was a
frostiness.
silver dragon.
Or okay, yeah. I was like, there was something about frost, like his eyes or something.
And that is sorry, yes, he was a silver dragon, and he kept some of his silver when he changed back into a human, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'd heard what silver dragons are or heard of any
Uh-uh.
other silver dragons before this, though.
No. All we're given is like the onyx dragons are the biggest ones and they're
Mhm.
the basically the soldiers, the fighters of the dragons. And then red, the fire breathing and whoever knows what else. I'm assuming all of the dragons can heal pretty quickly unless damaged with dragon bone. But
I mean, because Fail can heal too.
yeah.
Because she
And
mentioned that he doesn't have a scar on him, even though he was a fighter.
his perfect body.
Yeah. So, and that is one of the comments that people made about her because she'd been through whippings all the time and she still didn't have a single mark on her.
Which also worked against her because then the Lord Chamberlain kind of took it as a goal
Tried to,
to make her get
yeah,
scarred, which is harder on her,
yeah.
asshole. After the awkward betting and the vow, and Fel gets angry because he feels like he's been duped, he decides to think on it, just take her back to the north to his place, his home, the Borg, and they'll figure out next steps from there. And so then I think it's like part 3 or something. It's the crossing where they have to go by horseback for a couple weeks.
This
I was
sounds miserable.
yes, this sounds awful. I was like, ooh, I, I I basically shriveled up a little bit in pain. I was like, oh, this is owie because it's
She gets
raining. They're getting
blisters
yes.
down there.
It
from
doesn't
riding
say
this
anything. She doesn't say anything for the longest time because he was like, "You better not complain. We're just gonna ride hard to the north." She already feels like,
a
guilty
nuisance.
and for tricking him. And that's when we meet Thora, who kind of helps with
Soothe
that with
soothe
her
her
magic bomb.
fiery nether regions.
There were some steamy scenes and stuff with around this with him just taking care of her and checking on her even during the wedding bedding ceremony. I was just like, "Okay, okay."
Yeah. Um, they definitely had a connection during that bedding ceremony,
Literally.
and figuratively, all around.
There was also that scene where the wolves freaked out when she went to the kennels to say goodbye to Elise, and it's like, okay, we know from the prologue that the wolves and dragons hate each other because the wolves were used to hunt down the dragons.
Mhm.
So at this point, I wasn't sure whether she was a dragon or whether she was a witch, and witches were somehow bound to dragons.
I think there's possibly a little of both. I have a theory
Well,
that
there's different kinds of witches, right?
yeah, but I have a theory that this spell, as we've learned through countless other books, magic has a price, right? And we know that the witch died shortly after she did the spell on the dragons. I have a feeling there's going to be something about her giving up some of her power or something to make that happen. And then that power was used differently. And so now
Mm.
all of these little baby human dragons, shifters, have a little bit of witch power to them.
That'll be interesting to see.
I don't know. I may be clowning with this, but there has to be a price to her doing that.
So, picking back up during the crossing, there are a couple observations that we can make. So, one of them being Fell genuinely cares about the people that are suffering and does what he can to help them along the way there. And then we also see that there's danger even in the north. With these brigands and stuff that will kind of hold up passable roads and things like that. So we have Tamsin kind of taken upon herself to give away her necklace, which is a precious necklace to her because there are these big gemstones in it, one for each of her and her sisters, that she felt more like symbolically connected to them having this. Fel gets all upset because he's like, "You're kind of undermining me. I'm the beast of the borderlands. They know who I am. Now they're going to be like, oh, he's not really calling the shots," and they think that they can push and do all of that stuff. That's another one of these instances that gets Tamsin like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't be, complaining. I'm just going to be quiet and try not to,
Mhm.
annoy them even further," which leads to her horrible vaginal sores.
You also see that he actually cares. Like, he's struggling with what I'm calling a mate bond and having these feelings for her that he can't kind of pinpoint what they are because it's not born of actually knowing her. It's born of this cross or X that they have in their hand that like draws them to each other. And you find out later that it's a connection. So he can tell that she's not dead because he still feels this connection to her.
When she flies away as a dragon, freaking out, he basically uses it to direct him, like,
Yes,
which way to
a
go,
little
right?
compass. Like, where is
Which takes
she?
them, they end up at the Skog, this
Mhm.
very dangerous area that's inhabited by a creature called the Huldra, which this was one of the most fascinating scenes to me.
Okay, so I got very Odyssey vibes by Homer from all of this because he is going to find her. He's been on this long journey, and then the first monster that he sees is kind of like the siren that's pulling them all in with this face of a person that they all care about, right? And his is Tamsin. Again, a hint that she is more to him than he can even figure out why. But then you see Tamsin, who had just left the witch, Thora, and the witch is like, "I feel like you're gonna need these little straps of leather." Tamsin's like, "Well, I'm not gonna argue with the witch of the blood because they kinda can feel things that they shouldn't be able to. They're like little fortune tellers, right?" She meets this whole Huldra, and I keep wanting to call it a Hydra because that's mythology, but Huldra, and she can see past its faces into its actual being, which is an old hag. And you see that after a little while, so can Fel. He can see that it had multiple faces and that it wasn't actually Tamsin. But Tamsin, in this process, gets it to look at her and then shoves the leather piece in its mouth to where it can't talk and then hog ties it.
That was a funny scene.
and
What
saves them
annoyed
all.
me is that she saw Stick. I was like, "No! Why are you still seeing him? Why?"
Because to her, he's the only one who's ever showed her real love.
Love. Yeah.
Like, not
He he
in a
he gave her a pep
romantic
talk.
not in a romantic, but she is seeing him as a friend love. He's the first friend she actually had that was true to her. Not
Mhm.
because she was a whipping girl that took their whippings, not because she was something or could give them something, but just because she was.
The scene was so just uncomfortable
Mhm.
though, because she's seeing Fell just be a very, very touchy-feely, like hand up the dress, kind of touching this creature
Gross.
that's disgusting. And then the other two people that they're with, Magnus and Vidar, are the same thing. They're just like all over this creature and it's walking toward Tamsin, and just picturing this, it gives me the heebie-jeebies.
There are a lot of uncomfortable scenes in this book.
But they're fascinating. I'm like,
Yes.
this is why I like these kinds of stories, like seeing all this stuff play out. But they finally deal with the Huldra. They get finally to the Borg, which is his hometown, whatever. And this is where we see like her blood changes after she first shifts into a dragon. And so now she bleeds purple, and she's so paranoid that if she gets any kind of sexual tension or like close to him physically, that something's going to happen where he's going to be able to see that she's a dragon. So she's trying to keep her distance, which is like kind of making him feel bad and
Mhm.
upset about it. But he's one of those guys that's like, okay, I'm not going to pursue this unless she consents to it. So I guess I'll keep my distance. It's fine. And just busies himself doing other things. So I appreciated that about his character.
And then Stig shows up, professing his
With a
love
with an army.
and trying to avenge her death because he's convinced that there is not a dragon, that Fel was lying when he said a dragon took her,
And
and
she's just
that,
like standing on the ramparts, like, hi,
yeah.
it's me. I'm alive.
Well, and she didn't even know that there was something sent that she was dead. So
No
she has no
fell.
clue why he's showing up, but she's, he's her friend. So she's like, hi. He lets it be known that he is there to fight Fel.
Good luck with that.
And so they do fight. And in the process, they knock into her. I believe she's told Stig that she's a dragon or something like that. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then they knock into her and she starts bleeding
No,
purple.
his response was to just grab her face and make out with her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he gets thrown to the side by Fell.
Yes. Okay. And then they fight and she gets hit and she starts bleeding purple. And then she turns into her dragon.
And rides off with Fell. Like,
Yes.
like get on my back. And then they go to the crags. And that's where they're kind of, it's like they're paged by all these dragons flying around them in formation, like, you need to pull over now, type of thing, like
Well,
ramming
and
them.
they start ramming them. At one point, Fel falls off, and then that's when he turns into his dragon so that he doesn't splat in the earth.
And at the very end, we learn that he has a brother. Because isn't that like the last
Mm-hmm.
line of the book? Is like,
Welcome
hello,
back, brother.
brother. Welcome back. Yeah, something like that.
It's very Vampire Diaries. Hello, brother.
Hello, brother. I need to watch that. I feel like that'd be a good show to watch this fall. Anyway, the last we saw of Stig, though, was he had turned tail to run back to his army. So one can only suspect that in the next book, there's going to be a lot of battle drums being
Mm-hmm.
rounded up. But they don't know how many dragons. Or we don't know how many dragons exist. There are a ton, apparently.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot, and Little Miss Princess over here is probably going to have some big
Yeah.
shoes to fill.
We're not given the brother's name, right?
Mm-mm. No, it's just a hello, brother, and then end. I
Damn
even went
cliffhanger.
past and tried to like wait, that can't be the end of this book. And that's what I meant by it gets good right at the end. And then you're like, I spent 8 hours reading about all of this other crap, and then right at the end you got me in. But I guess sometimes they have to do it to get you to want to read the second book.
Yeah, especially for a debut adult
Uh-huh.
romantasy, I guess, too. They got to get their hooks in you. Hopefully, we won't have to wait a long time. Just looking at her backlist of books that she's written, written. I mean, she has written quite a bit, so hopefully it's not a very long wait. I also like the books that are like the first print runs of this first edition book. They have like these beautiful kind of royal blue stained edges and some really
Ooh.
pretty dragon color like end papers in them. They look really pretty.
Oh, I might have to go buy it just for the
And
prettiness.
the character art where you
Yeah.
see him and the little fiery redhead.
Okay. Definitely worth a read.
Thank you, Avon, for the advanced reader copy. Hopefully, we won't have to wait long and we can talk about the next book next year, maybe toward the end of the year. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Sophie Jordan, no rush.
But kind of a rush because you left us
But
on a big cliffhanger here.
yes. And then next week, get ready for our sequel episode to It Ends With Us. It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. Jeez. As we head into October and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we'll get to finish up Lily and Atlas and Ryle's story. So we hope you enjoyed this discussion and that we tempted you to pick up a copy of A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. And until next week, we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.